Why is West Asia always having a crisis? Why does it always see so much of tumultuous relations and constant conflicts around?
The center, this West Asia has been so important from religious, cultural, economic and strategic point of view that it has seen continuous turmoil, continuous warfare, continuous intervention, local and regional and international intervention.
When we talk about such a long history, so many different identities, is it the identity crisis that fuels so much of conflict? Or is it the lack of resources? Or is there a lot of resources?
Simple example I can give you. After the rise of Islam, the Prophet advised his followers to greet each other with Assalamu alaikum, peace be on you. And that is basically because they were fighting. They were fighting to death over a piece of land or a camel or a goat or any dishonor, and anything went wrong means they would fight to the end to kill the other tribe.
हेलो एंड नमस्ते, मेरा नाम है डॉक्टर दीपानिता और आपका स्वागत है श्रीराम्स आईएएस के इनॉग्रल पॉडकास्ट पे। आज हमारे साथ है एक लीडिंग एकेडमिशियन जो कि मेरे खुद के प्रोफेसर रह चुके हैं जेएनयू में, ए.के. पाशा सर। पाशा सर, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल वेलकम टू द पॉडकास्ट। एंड एक ब्रीफ इंट्रोडक्शन की तरह आप सभी को मैं बता दूं कि ही इज अ लीडिंग एक्सपर्ट ऑन वेस्ट एशिया एंड ही हैज रिटन सेवरल बुक्स ऑन द गल्फ, इजराइल-पैलेस्टाइन कॉन्फ्लिक्ट, और आजकल वो डायरेक्टर हैं सेंटर फॉर इंडिया वेस्ट एशिया डायलॉग पे। तो आज इस पर्टिकुलर पॉडकास्ट में सर वी आर गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट वेस्ट एशिया। हम साथ में ही बात करेंगे कि इंडिया का क्या पर्सपेक्टिव है इस रीजन के साथ, किस तरीके से इसको इम्प्रूव किया जा सकता है, एंड बेसिक जो क्वेरीज या डाउट्स एक एस्पिरेंट के दिमाग में आता है जब इस रीजन को पढ़ते हैं वो। ठीक है सर, तो सबसे पहले तो वेलकम टू द पॉडकास्ट। स्टार्ट करते हैं सर पहला क्वेश्चन से। व्हाई इज वेस्ट एशिया ऑलवेज हैविंग अ क्राइसिस? व्हाई डज इट ऑलवेज सी सो मच ऑफ tumultuous relations and constant conflicts around?
Thank you, Dr. Dipanwita. I'm glad SRIRAM Institute has started this new social media podcast. You have taken the initiative.
Thank you, sir.
Into the new technology which will enlighten millions around the world.
I hope so, sir.
Your question is extremely important because among all the regions India is surrounded with, West Asia has been the oldest, with which it has connections going back to beyond 5,000 years of recorded history. As you know, this region, West Asia, spanning from Iran to Morocco, West Asia and North Africa, this is the center of the world, known as the hub of the world. If you see the Greek meaning of the Mediterranean word, sea, that is middle part of the earth. So this has not only geopolitical, geostrategic interest, geo-economic interest, which will come to that later, but this is the oldest inhabited center of the world.
When we talk about such a long history, so many different identities, is it the identity crisis that fuels so much of conflict? Or is it the lack of resources? Or is there a lot of resources?
You see, this region is endowed with abundant resources. At the present juncture, we have oil, gas, and very rare minerals. And more important is its strategic location. It is surrounded by at least 4 strategic choke points. The Turkish Straits linking the Black Sea with the Mediterranean Sea through the Sea of Marmara. Then the Suez Canal linking the Mediterranean with the Red Sea and Gulf of Suez. Then you have the Bab el-Mandab, Red Sea and the northwestern Indian Ocean, plus the Persian Gulf linking with the Arabian Sea. So this, and in the north you have the Caspian Sea also. So this strategic location has been historically very important from a number of perspectives. One is, of course, this has been the center of 3 known Semitic religions: Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And this has been the terminus for the Silk Road. linking the East Asia from Japan, Korea to China through India, Central Asia. And much of the known historical trade flourished in this region for not only the region but also Europe, Africa, and much of Asia. So it is resource-wise known for traders with a number of languages who were familiar with, and the resources were abundant because the people in this region, their main profession has been trade and commerce for centuries. So the accumulation of resources led to establishment of empires, innumerable empires, from the Egyptian civilization to the Yemeni civilization, the Assyrian civilization, the Babylonian, Mesopotamian civilization on the banks of Tigris, Euphrates. Then you have the Magan civilization in Oman, then the Dilmun civilization in Bahrain and eastern part of Saudi Arabia, apart from various other smaller ones which flourished in present-day Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the Nabateans in Jordan, Petra as their capital, and lesser known kingdoms. All of these accumulated wealth because of their trade, because of their different religions background, and also because of the tribes which traversed all of these four regions: Europe, Africa, Asia, and Central Asia in particular. So in that way, this region, due to its richness, its strategic location, because of the trade routes, has been wide by people and empires. So everyone has tried to capture this region or bring this area under their influence, whether it is the pharaohs of Egypt or the Canaanites, Phoenicians who were in Levant, or the Europeans, the Roman Empire, even Alexander the Great, or the Persians who ruled in the period before Islam, or Mongols who came later on. So all of these kingdoms rose and fell in this region. So you have a litany of kingdoms which flourished, which saw its decline, and also it has become the graveyard of the most successful and the richest empires. The richest, of course, was the pharaoh,
the Egyptian.
and the Egyptian ruler who, during the period of Prophet Moses, he liberated the Jews from the captivity of Ramses II. And it is recorded in the Quran that the keys to his wealth was carried on over 142 elephants. Just the key bunch. Such was the accumulated wealth of the pharaohs. And he tried to capture Prophet and recaptivate the Jews, but because of divine whatever help it came, the Red Sea separated the Jews, and they were able to cross into Sinai and go to Mount Sinai, where he got the Ten Commandments. And the Pharaoh and his army and all his wealth were sunk in a lake called Karwan. It is still in the western part of Egypt, near Cairo, a place called Fayoum. I've been there, and I have seen divers and people going into that lake and still recovering gold and ornaments, still, even to this day, which means you can imagine the abundant wealth he had accumulated. So in that way, the Nabateans also, these people, Nabatean is a word in Arabic which means vegetarian. And these people traded in gold, silver, rubies, and other luxury items. And this word Nabatean is associated with India.
Oh, that's interesting. And how is that, sir?
And they are very close to people called Jains.
Okay.
And they were basically traders. who would take these items from India and part of the Silk Road, and they needed security for their caravans from India, from Persia, Balochistan to Arabia, and right up the Mediterranean, Beirut, Gaza, and Alexandria, and Izmir. So they became so powerful because of the trade and commerce in bullion, in gold, silver, that they established an empire. If you see in Petra, their vault and the treasury and the caves they have built, you can imagine more than 7,000 years ago, they were so powerful, unimaginable, like the Giza pyramids, which were built in the middle of the Sahara Desert, where you don't find a pebble, a small stone, but huge boulders of room size. They were able to lift to such heights. You can see the wealth and the science and technology which they had used during that period. So in that way, the center, this West Asia, has been so important from religious, cultural, political, economic, and strategic point of view, that it has seen continuous turmoil, continuous warfare, continuous intervention, local and regional and international intervention, and people got divided into innumerable tribes. Apart from Africa, you will not find so many tribes as you will in this region. And it is unique that these tribes, warring tribes as they are known as, so they used to fight over small issue of land. Even an acre or a place of land they would fight for decades to retain. So that is the commitment and attachment, especially for land which is arable and where water is found. Because as you know, this is a desert,
Yes,
and holding on to greenery is something very dear to them. We'll come to this, why there is attachment to this land a little later.
Right, sir.
But I have seen with my eyes, when you visit Saudi Arabia for Hajj, there is a place called Mina and Muzdalfa. Once you perform during that period, you have to be for a night in the open. And I did this in 2006. And, me and my wife had to pitch on a small piece of land there in the open. It was cold, but I had an Yemeni family, fairly large family, and they would not budge even an inch, although they would encroach my place which I was given. But I could deduce from that how strongly they would resist even an inch of land. So they were not able to, they would fight and kill for the sake of piece of land. And that is how land has become very important for them as a possession, rich land, agriculture land. And another instance is the Portuguese who came to this region trying to find a direct sea route from Portugal to India. Of course, they reached Calicut in 1498 May, but their conquest of Hormuz was complete, parts of Oman was complete, and they tried to blockade the Bab al-Mandab, the Red Sea now, because much of the spices the Arabs used to smuggle through the Red Sea to Cairo and then to Italy, where only Venice was the main market. And the Portuguese bombarded Yemen, present-day Houthis, held territories for over 82 years.
The Sana area or the Aden area?
Sana area.
Sana area, oh.
They were able to capture Aden,
okay,
but they could not go beyond.
Oh.
The Hudaida port particularly,
right, sir.
And the northern part, which is controlled by the Houthis, for a long period. They could not subdue the Yemenis. And ultimately, they had to give up. And that is how the Yemenis fought back. Just to give you one instance, I can give you the Kurdish example, what they did in the region, so on and so forth. So for them, land is extremely important, and that is how you have these tribes fighting over a long period of time. Whether it is the tribes in present-day Saudi Arabia or in Yemen or in other parts, they have continued, and it is after the Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, and the British finally, during the First World War, divided both Britain and France, this region, with the demise of the Ottoman Empire, who could not subdue the Arabs, who could not really control the entire Arabian Peninsula fully, because they had to give autonomy to the Hashemites or Mecca, Medina, then agree for a sultan in Egypt, and then autonomy for Yemen, and autonomy to various tribes. So even the Ottomans, with their most powerful army, they could not control the warring Arab tribes, etc., etc. So the British, what they did was, instead of fighting these tribes, they made them sedentary. They were otherwise moving around from place to place.
How did they do that, sir?
And that was done once the green areas allocated to families, whether it is Egypt was already under the control of the Khadivs and successors of Muhammad Ali, and Syria and Palestine and Lebanon gradually were under various groups. The Maronites were there in Lebanon, and then the Alawites, and the other Palestinians, etc., etc. So these are one of the oldest states. It was easier for them to manage and install kings and rulers and other people. So in that way, the state system was put in place, where regulations, then passports, all of these identity cards were introduced. But the tribes in the Arabian Peninsula were still moving in different directions. So what they did was, they gave flags to these tribes. People in Kuwait, the Al-Sabahs, were given a particular flag that this belongs to you. Because these tribes would move from one area to the other and then attack the British ships. So in order to contain piracy, what they did was, they were on the other side of the Persian Gulf also, right from Bushehr to Bandar Abbas. So they removed most of the Arabs from the Persian coast, so that one coast is neutralized. So they brought here, and that is how some Persians still speak Arabic.
Oh, that's
on the
interesting,
other
sir.
side. But most of the Arabs were relocated on the other side, and they were given Kuwait, the Bahrain, and the Qatif area of Saudi Arabia, then Qatar and
Is it that the
UAE.
Abu Musa Islands and Tunb Islands are problematic because of this?
Yeah, most of them are
okay.
Arabic speaking.
Right,
They
sir.
marry the
Yes,
Arabs.
it was in the news this year. Yeah, Abu Musa and
So
Tunb.
that is how they were made sedentary.
Okay,
They
sir.
were not allowed to move out of these places, and they were virtually under house arrest of the British. And
colonialism was havoc for the region.
yeah, but the other interesting point is, along with their determination to control every piece of land, it was their commitment to liberate the land also. It's very strong among the people. Whether it is the Algerians who sacrificed hundreds and thousands, or the Tunisians, or the Egyptians, or now the Palestinians. The Omanis were the only Arabs after the end of the Abbasid Empire in 1258 AD, which came to an end with the invasion of Mongols of the Abbasid Empire in Baghdad. The Arabs went to deep, long slumber for a long time. It was only the Omanis who were able to expel the Portuguese from Hormuz, from Bahrain, from Bandar Abbas, from present-day Muscat, and the entire coast of Arabian Peninsula, Salalah including, and parts of Aden. And Al-Yarubis, the Omanis and Al-Yarubis, they built very powerful ships, sometimes more powerful and well-armed compared to the Portuguese. And they were able to expel the Portuguese from much of this region, and also East Africa, Kilwa, Zanzibar, parts of Mombasa, so on and so forth. And they chased them in the entire Indian Ocean. And the Portuguese were confined to Goa. It was because of the Omanis.
That's powerful, right, at that point of time.
So, in that way, the desire to be independent, to follow their own culture, religion, whatever, customs, traditions, is very strong among these people. So, any intruder is seen as trying to undermine their society, their way of life, their religion, their culture, so on and so forth. So, these two traits, not many people can discern why it is historically important for people out from outside to understand why they are warring tribes. For example, a simple example I can give you. After the rise of Islam, the Prophet advised his followers to greet each other with Assalamu alaikum, peace be on you. And that is basically because they were fighting. They were fighting to death over a piece of land or a camel or a goat or any dishonor, and anything went wrong means they would fight to the end to kill the other tribe. So that bloodshed was there, notorious for centuries. And this was the thing ordained by the Prophet that you must maintain peace, the believers. So these two traits are very important. I have given the example of Yemen, Oman, and the others who have tried to dominate them. They may temporarily accept domination, maybe because of their weakness or inherent flaws. But ultimately, the desire is to get rid of that and be independent, autonomous, so that they can practice what they have been doing for generations and generations.
So, sir, now that we understand the region is so tumultuous, do you see the Israel-Palestinian conflict as a part of this understanding? I will, because if we talk about the region, one of the conflicts that is very dominant is the Israel-Palestine. I obviously read what you have written about it on this particular topic, but I wanted for all the viewers also to understand, what is your take on the biggest conflict of the region, which is the Israel-Palestinian conflict?
Yeah, no doubt about it. But it is interesting because it is only a little over 100 years old. But before that, there is absolutely no conflict between these two ancient peoples, who call each other as people of the book.
Correct, sir.
They respected and they admired and they cooperated, and there is no history of conflict between the two. They prospered.
Is it the land then?
Yes, I'll come to that.
Right, sir.
So the cooperation has been so intense that many families from both sides married. Jews married the Muslims. The Muslims married the Jews. And this is true of Muslims and Christians. I've lived in Egypt for 4 years. And initially it was so difficult for me to identify who is a Christian and who is a Muslim, because they have similar names. They greet in the same way. They speak the same language. The only point where I could identify was a woman who would have a cross. Otherwise, for me to find out the male who is a Muslim or a Christian, it is extremely difficult. Such is the bond. And across Egypt, you have people in the villages also marrying Christians and Muslims. It's very common. It's nothing very surprising. And same is the case between Sunnis and Shias in Iraq or in Syria or anything. There is no sectarian, not much of it. It has been highlighted. So the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, for example, much of the Jews were expelled by the Spanish from the Iberian Peninsula. So they came to North Africa and to Ottoman Empire and much of the Arab world, or even the Persian Qajar dynasty or Safavid dynasty, where they were respected. The Jews were respected because of their specialization in trade and commerce. And financial, anything to do with finance, it was in the hands of the Jews. In the entire Arab history, if you take pre-Islamic also, anything to do with, including interest, So the Muslim rulers believed that they are the best people to handle. Many of the Muslim rulers had finance ministers as Jews.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So this is on record, and not only in this region but also in their trade with India along the west coast. Most of the traders were Jewish traders. All the Hindu kings, Muslim
The
rulers.
Baghdadi Jews.
Yeah, basically. And also Yemeni Jews. And also from Egypt. Cairo was a major center.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So these Jews were not only in the Indian western coast, but also in Canton, present-day Hong Kong, and in Singapore, which were important links in the trade in East Asia. So in that way, the cooperation between the Jews and the Arabs was spread over centuries of brotherhood and cooperation, so on and so forth, including the Ottoman Empire. The richest Jews were in Istanbul, and still many billionaires you will find in Istanbul. Still, the number of Jews who are millionaires in Turkey, not many people know, like they are in Russia or Soviet Union, now Russia also. Most of the millionaires who are friends of Putin are Jews.
Oh, that's interesting, sir. Again, because I never had a good time, not good time, I never got a good greeting in Turkey when I came with an Israeli visa. So I did not know that there are so many.
That is now political, but historically they have a different quarter, Jewish quarter in the old city, like they have in Damascus, which I have visited,
okay, sir.
which is still vacant because the Jews temporarily left those quarters, which has not been occupied by anybody. It is still vacant, and the property is in the names of these Jewish families, old families who are abroad, some of them in America. So in that way, the conflict was basically created by the Europeans. This Arab-Jewish conflict was created by the Europeans. Basically, as you know, in the 1st century AD, the Romans occupied what is present day the entire Mediterranean coast, right up to Tunis and Algeria. There were sizable Jewish tribes in present-day Israel, Palestine, the West Bank and Gaza and other areas. And they were not in a position to contain the the Roman power, military power. And they were not willing to surrender. The Jews, like the other tribes, the other Arab tribes who were easily subjugated. So some of the Jewish tribes refused to surrender to the Roman Empire, and they barricaded themselves on hilltop of Jerusalem, which is known as the Masada complex.
Yes,
so they committed suicide, like you have the Sati system in India when the slave dynasty overtook Delhi, so on and so forth. But to escape persecution by the Romans, because they accused the Jews of killing Jesus, because he was also a Jew, but he was, crucified, and the Jews were held responsible. So in order to escape persecution, discrimination, the Jews fled to all known parts of the world in the 1st century AD, and bulk of them remained in the region, including Persia. But some of them went to Europe, who faced enormous persecution from Russia to England and from Poland, Finland to Spain. In almost all countries, there is a recorded history of persecution, discrimination, and ghettoization of the Jews. They were not allowed to stay in cities, and they had to live outside the cities, and their children were not allowed to enter or study in the cities held by the Christians, especially Orthodox Christians, who not human beings virtually. But they were needed by these Christian kings and people because of their specialization in finance. Money lending was their main profession, and that's how They were needed but also despised because they became very rich, like the Marwari community in India. Also in Karnataka particularly, they came handful of them, but now they are the richest people. Likewise in different parts of India. So the Jews were befriended by the kings and ruling elites, but much of the public still resented them because of the accumulated wealth, so on and so forth. It was the Jews who financed the geographical discoveries because of their interest in trade and commerce, whether it is Vasco da Gama or Columbus, Amerigo, and all of these huge, including the East India Company.
Was funded by the Jews.
They were the principal stakeholders. So much of the new world, new colonies were discovered with the help of the Jewish merchants' support and aid. So that is how, and also there is something unique about Jews. They're driven to the wall and persecuted and haunted by the entire Christian population for their supposed guilt and so on and so forth. They have shined in almost all fields. Even before the Nobel Prize was instituted, they were the best of doctors, engineers, teachers, professions. Any field you take from the 1st century up to the 19th century. You study any history of Poland, or British or Russian or East European, you will have the best. Although they were discriminated and not allowed to have their own education. But still, they shined. So there is something unique, God-gifted genetic intelligence, I must say. So that is unique to this group, which I think is not found in any other ethnic or racial group. It is supremely important for them to be recognized because this is a fact of history, known and recognized. So in that way, the Jews played a very important role not only in the geographical discoveries, but also in the British overseas trade, commerce, colonies, everything. And also they played an important role in the Russian Revolution, which brought communism. All the leading, whether it is Lenin or other leaders, were all Jewish. So in that way, the Europeans were approached by the Lord Rothschild and many traders. First they approached the Ottoman Sultan for a piece of land in Palestine. He declined. Then they approached the Kaiser Germany's ruler. He also for various reasons declined. But it was the British who accepted. They were very smart. They saw this strategic place of Palestine, Egypt, and Suez Canal, and India, crown jewel, and their lifeline transport, so on and so forth. So they agreed, and that's how the Balfour Declaration was given in 1917 by the British Foreign Secretary, who promised a land for the Jews in Palestine, and that's how it started thing. And the wealthy Jews from Europe, they started buying land. Whole villages were bought, and the Nazi persecution of Jews in the 30s, Holocaust, and how they had to flee. Most of them went to Canada, Europe, Australia, and the rest, some of them to Palestine, and that's how the British facilitated because of their hold over the monarchy in Egypt, and the French also facilitated through their mandates in Lebanon and Syria, and the Hashemite kingdom also facilitated. So in that way, the British and the French pacified the rulers who were actually made by them, both the British and the French. They were all beholden to the British and the French, whether it is King Farouk of Egypt or King Abdullah the Great to the British, or even Abdulaziz of Saudi Arabia, who was beholden because the British helped him against the Ottomans, or the Syrian and the Lebanese elites also. So in that way, this region was told that these Jews would be allowed to stay here, and that's how the process started in coming of the Jews. And from 1917 Balfour Declaration up to 1948, various attempts were made because there was conflict between the Palestinians and the Jews in the form of Palestinian revolt in 21, 22, up to 28, which was suppressed by the British with very harsh measures, and hundreds and thousands of leaders and people were killed by the British, and it was suppressed. But the Mufti of Jerusalem, he took up this cause. He was pro-German, and he went out of Jerusalem for various reasons because of the British pressure also. And the British eventually were targeted by the Jews themselves, who resorted to violence. All the Stun Gang, Irgun, and other Jewish groups resorted to terrorism, violence, and the British officers were killed. King David Hotel was blown up in Jerusalem. So the British finally handed over the mandate of the Palestine to the United Nations, and UN General Assembly passed by a majority Resolution 181 in November again, 1947, which divided partitioned rather the mandated territory of Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state. But the Arabs rejected that, and the first war, Arab-Israeli war, was fought, and Israel was established on 14th in 1948, and we have seen the rest
and it's unfolding even today. So let us come to India now, and I just want to understand what is the main again source of interest, different sources of interest that India has with this region. Of course, the geographical proximity and the trade and everything. But if we talk about India's foreign policy, West Asia is one of the strongest pillar. So in that light, what are the main again, source of interest that India has?
Yeah, you very rightly pointed out the geographical proximity has pulled both the regions for centuries together. It has facilitated movement of people, traders, cultural connections, and religious connections, and various other fields. But our links with this region came to prominence, especially in 1973, since 1973.
The oil crisis?
That is a turning point, because until then only a few Gujarati families were there in Oman or in UAE or in Bahrain. And in Bahrain and UAE, Dubai particularly, these Banias, as they were called, Gujarati Bhatiyas from Rajasthan and Gujarat, they were on the Iranian side in the Bandar Abbas and in Basra, Bushehr and other places. The Qajar monarch had nationalized the customs duties, so they took over, which was in the hands of the Banias. So they left these places. Some of the houses, temples in Bandar Abbas are still vacant, which were occupied by the Gujaratis there. And the area where the Ganesh temple was there in Basra is still there, have been there. So that idol was brought from Basra to Bahrain, and the idol from Bandar Abbas was brought to Dubai, which is still there. So these are the early connections, right? And these connections brought, and also Arabs for various reasons, particularly trade, they came and stayed for quite some time in Gujarat and present day Mumbai and Calicut and beyond in the west coast, and some married, and their offsprings were known as Mapillas, and in Gujarat they have different names all along the coast. So in that way, there are many families, Yemenis particularly, Omanis particularly, from present-day Ras Al Khaimah in UAE, and the Shias from Qatif, eastern Saudi Arabia, and many traders from Kuwait and Basra. They are all in different parts of India. And also from Oman, Salalah, a tribe called Shinfar, Large number of them are found. Of course, now they are Indianized. They are in different parts of Maharashtra, in Aurangabad, in Hyderabad, so on and so forth. Some of them came, of course, from East Africa, present-day Somalia, Djibouti, and Mombasa, Dar es Salaam area, and they are known as Siddhis. Some of them have become Christians. Their leader is buried near Karachi, a place called Thatta, which is their pilgrim center. But most of them are in India, in Gujarat, in Maharashtra, Karnataka, so on and so forth. So this is the old connection which has been revived after 73 for many reasons. One is the abundance of oil resources in this region, which enabled them to launch massive economic development. Because as you know, these were all sparsely populated, with no infrastructure, with no drinking water, and no power, in fact. Many of the Indians whom I meet, old timers, they say before 73 it was generators, because there was no electricity, there was no drinking water. The oil cans, the steel cans, tin cans, they were taken from India, and they were used to bring water from the Tigris Euphrates to Kuwait and other parts, because there was no water to drink in much of this region. After 73, it has transformed. They had the money, they had the determination to develop, and they needed labor and construction labor. First, hundreds and thousands of Indians went there, like other people from Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, so on and so forth. Now the Indian community is about 9 million plus in all the 6 GCC countries, plus another 2 million in different other parts of West Asia and North Africa. So this is an important human bridge. If you go to any part of Gulf airport or the 22 airports in India, you have over 50 flights in 24 hours.
Yeah, the soft power.
No other region is so well connected. From Ahmedabad to Muscat, it takes less time than you take from Delhi to Bombay.
That's true, sir.
Or Delhi to Bangalore. So most of this region is so well connected, and hundreds and thousands of families move every day, every hour, 24 hours. And so this human bridge is the most important, and this is based on the historical link. And the Arabs prefer to interact with Indians from all parts of India, because they have found the most suitable people for them as partners in development. So this human link has historical, cultural, religious, and economic tie to that. The second one is their abundance in oil and gas and our lack of it. So that makes energy security extremely important, because over 85% of the oil and gas comes from this region. Bulk of the CNG from Qatar, oil increasingly from Iraq and Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, UAE, and to a certain extent other countries. So energy security is important for us. The third one is trade. Of course, trade also has a long history, but it has picked up since 73. And I don't want to go to individual figures, but broadly, India, GCC, and India and West Asia, North Africa, if you put together, this is the largest trading partner of India, over $150 billion. We don't have so much of trade with China, with the United States, or with EU, if you put that as a unit. So this region is extremely important for our trade and investments. Fourth one. Since they have abundant surplus capital, they have been investing both through the government agencies with very low interest rate, like Kuwait Fund for Development, Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabian Development Fund, so on and so forth. But now most of those projects are complete. So now the people who invest, of course the government, these governments, sovereign wealth fund, they are investing. Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Kuwait, and others. But now, more important than the governments are the private investors, because you have Arab billionaires in all of these countries. And sometimes they are richer than the states in some places. So in that way, they have a huge capital access. And they invest in both public and private sector in India. And that is how investments have grown. I'm talking about the Arabs.
That's it.
But there are over 100 Indians who are billionaires.
They are investing in Arab world?
No, they have started investing in India now.
Oh.
Earlier, they would accumulate capital and give it to the rulers. But now the rulers don't need so much of wealth. They have their own oil income. So now they have a surplus, the Indians, who are very successful from Gujarat, from Kerala, from different parts of the country. They have made fortunes. And they see India as an emerging economy with a huge potential
You have a
to
mall
growth.
chain now, right now, sir.
Huge potential for growth and absorbing billions of dollars in infrastructure. So in that way, this group also is investing, looking up for... sometimes they would invest in Western banks, these Indian individuals. But now they increasingly look to the mother country to invest there, which is a good thing. Then the sixth one is food security. You know, we are over 1.4 billion people. And we produced about 3.25 million tons of food grains last year for this population. And we need to keep growing this number, food production. And for this, you need fertilizer.
Comes from.
Chemical fertilizer particularly. And since we don't have enough gas, we import it for cooking gas and for transport. So we have not been able to produce enough urea, ammonia, nitrogen, nitrate, and so on and so forth. Since this region has abundance of phosphate from Syria to Yemen to Saudi Arabia, Iran, Jordan, Morocco, Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia. So both public and private sector has established fertilizer factories in much of this region. And we have 100% buyback facility from these plants. So bulk of our chemical fertilizer comes from Morocco to Iran and from Syria and Qatar to Oman. IFCO has a plant in Oman. So for food security, this region is extremely important. Just to give you one instance, sometime back in my state, in Karnataka, during the sowing season, the ship carrying chemical fertilizer from one of the Gulf countries arrived late at Mangalore port. And there were riots by the farmers, and a couple of farmers died because the fertilizer did not come on time.
We are so dependent on that then.
Such is the need, timely arrival of fertilizers. Of course, we used to import from Russia and Ukraine also, but because of the problems there, our dependence on the West Asian region for food security, this also is very important. Maritime security. As you know, bulk of our trade is with this region and through Persian Gulf and Bab al-Mandab, Red Sea, Suez Canal, Europe, since the North-South corridor is still not active through Chabahar, through Iran and
the
Russia,
piracy
Europe.
in the way we are providing security.
Yeah. So Somalia is dysfunctional. So the people there, are desperate to survive, and they find the Europeans coming there and taking their fish also. So they do anything possible to survive, and they hijack, and they did it for quite some time. And for our maritime security, Oman has been very cooperative. Our ships are allowed to dock and rest and recreate. And in Djibouti also we have facilities. Dukham also, now it is coming up in Oman, although the Chinese are also interested there. We have some facilities in Seychelles and Madagascar and in the East African place also. Now with the Houthi problem in Yemen, which even the greatest superpower could not subdue them. The British also, the German, French, and
the GCC coalition, sir, also.
The UAE and Saudi Arabia also had to accept a ceasefire. So they are a very difficult people nobody has been able to subdue, like the Afghans who kicked the Americans after 20 years of struggle, or the Kurdish people.
They know the land very well.
Or the Kurdish people who have not given up fighting. Whether it is Iran or Turkey or Syria or Iraq. So these mountainous people are very hardy people. They don't give up easily. So this maritime security also has become a very serious issue because of the poverty in Yemen. Everything has been destroyed. Not only because of the civil war, but also because of the Saudi UAE bombing and now British, American, Israeli bombing, so on and so forth. So this will only intensify in the future because whatever little infrastructure was left has been decimated. So their only survival is to make money from hijacking of ships.
Yes.
So this will continue for the foreseeable future, whether it is Gaza conflict or ceasefire or whatever. Even if the Palestinian state is established, the Houthis will not give up because there is nothing they can grow or survive on. So maritime security is extremely important for us, and not only Oman but also UAE and Iran are also cooperating, and we have naval exercises from most of the countries in this region. Then of course the cultural and religious factor. Millions of Indian Muslims go to Karbala, Najaf in Iraq, the Shia holy places, then to Jerusalem, to Mecca, Medina for Hajj and Umrah. And no matter which governments, either way, this flow of people continues for reasons well known in history. So in that way, this factor also bonds the two regions together, and it's extremely important not only for Indian governments but also as tourism revenues for the Saudis. They are giving quotas after quotas, liberally visas for Indians because many of them would like to go. Like the newly discovered religious identity among the Turks. After the Indonesian, Pakistanis, Indians, it is the Turks who are coming in large numbers, who were rarely seen earlier before Erdogan came to power. Very few would make Hajj. Like no Ottoman Sultan has made Hajj, although they control Mecca and Medina. Like no Mughal Sultan made Hajj because they thought they are the powerful empires. So in that way, now they have increasingly adopted Hajj as a religious identity among the Turks, like others among Central Asia, Russian, Chechen, Dagestani, and so on and so forth. But the last, but not the least, is peace, security, and stability in this region, which is extremely important for India for the 8 reasons I have enumerated.
Absolutely, sir.
And this region, as I said, has seen foreign intervention in historical terms, in contemporary terms, and in future also nobody can prevent foreign interventions. So both the domestic factors, because there is domestic rivalry also, whether it is Iran or Saudi Arabia or Iran and Israel or Turkey and Saudi Arabia, because these 3 countries are vying for Islamic leadership. Iran after 79, Turkey under Erdogan, and Saudi Arabia has been the OIC headquarters. So 3 countries have not been successful in dominating the Islamic world. There is competition, fierce rivalry, and this would continue as long as they have the resources. So in that way, the rivalry continues, and besides this, you have aspirations of the neighboring countries also. Whether it is Iran interested in its axis of resistance, or Turkey in its support to Muslim Brotherhood groups, or Egypt, earlier Nasser and all his interventions, and in Yemen and Iraq and Syria, UAR, all of that. And of course, the foreign imperial powers. Russia has been a major country which has been interested for centuries in this region, from Turkey.
With the Assad government falling now.
Yeah, with Turkey to Russia, Iran to present day Syria. The Russians have historical interest because they are surrounded by countries. They want to move towards the warm water ports.
Yes, sir.
That's the reason why they came to Afghanistan. They got beaten. And now also they tried in Syria with Assad. They may have to leave Syria, Tartus and Latakia. So these regional powers have their own ambitions and their linkages with external powers, whether it is America, or Britain, or France, or Italy in Libya, for example. So, this region is prone for foreign intervention and internal turmoil because of the tribes, because of the different types of political systems, Republican versus monarchy, Islamic versus secular, Shia, Sunni, ethnic, racial, all of these factors are there. So this region is known for a number of hotspots. If you solve one, another one pops up. So in that way, it is a major challenge for the Indian policymakers. How to navigate in this minefield between Shia, Sunni, between monarchies and republicans, between pan-Islamic and pan-Arab, Baathist and non-Baathist, in between Israel and the Arabs.
It just keeps getting more and more.
So priority has been to have best of relations with Arabs and non-Arabs, Turks and Israelis. So that is how we deal with each country in a bilateral level. What is known as de-hyphenation.
Yes.
We deal with Jordan, with Palestine, with Israel, with Turkey, Iran, so on and so forth. So in that way, claim to be friends of all, but nobody takes us seriously. We are concerned. We are concerned only with our energy, with our workers, their safety and security, our maritime, food and investments and so on and so forth. We are doing reasonably well. And we aspired at one stage to mediate between the Arabs and the Israelis, but I think we have given up. It's too much for us. The headache is for the others to solve them who have taken responsibility. So that is how we should look at India and West Asia. And this will be sustained no matter which government on either side, whether monarchies on the other side or Islamic republics, or NDA or whatever in India. So these are enduring interests. So in that way, this would continue as long as we need oil, as long as they need workers, as long as there is turmoil and militancy. And also this militancy, violence, extremism, terrorism has affected domestic situation in Kerala and Kashmir and other parts, put pressure on the secular system society we are trying to build, because by and large the democracy has taken roots, the structures are strong, and changeover of government, transfer of power has been smooth, unlike any other developing country which became independent in 40s. So in that way, we may not be a perfect democracy, we are not a perfect secular society, but by and large those structures are growing and they will be sustained. But turmoil from this region sometimes impacts. Like turmoil in that region raises oil prices, which impacts our economy and also political stability. Just to give you one example, after the 73 oil price increase, from $1.5 to almost $8 to $12 a barrel, Mrs. Gandhi found it extremely difficult to contain the inflation.
One of the reasons for the entire
75, the emergency was declared because every sector was on strike. The police, the public sector, protests and the firing and this and that. So external factor also impacted the domestic stability. So like the non-arrival of chemical fertilizer, I gave you an example. So our interests are so intertwined with this region. There's no other region. We have cultural relations with Southeast Asia, Central Asia, East Asia, also Buddhism and so on and so forth. But the enduring part in political, economic, cultural, maritime, food, all of these links are live and growing with this region. And there is no doubt this will grow. There is no end in sight for this.
That's it.
So in that way, for policymakers, it is daily firefighting, because some problem or the other crops. Some Indians taken hostage, some abducted, some turmoil here, some coup there, some civil war there. There is perpetual instability, and it's a major challenge for Indian diplomats, Indian diplomacy, Indian foreign ministry. It's the most challenging job anyone
this
can
entire
handle.
division, the Gulf division and the Middle East.
And I've been part of the MEA on deputation to Egypt, and I've seen how the challenges have emerged from various angles and how we have been dealing with that. And also director of Gulf Studies at JNU gave me the opportunity to interact with diplomats from the MEA, from West Asia, North Africa, Gulf Division, so on and so forth. So in that way, we have to take a holistic picture of how best we can sustain this enormous linkages which are growing.
Right, sir. So, but as a point, I would like to say that when I teach West Asia, one of the most frequently asked question is India-West Asia relations. And in 9 points, it is such a big topic which I take 2 days to cover. You just point-wise, you explained everything. Thank you so much for that. And with this note, I'm going to end today's podcast. Thank you so much for joining me and Pasha sir for this podcast. I'll see you in the next one. Till then, take care. Bye.